Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on.
Have no fear, little one. I am here to protect thee.
Possible Mimic or Something More Sinister by Striking Place 8507. Everything in this story is completely true to the best of my knowledge. Nothing has been made up, and everything described is something either I or a friend personally experienced. I've been sitting on this story for a while and wanted to share it to see what other people think. Before I get into it, I should mention that I've had a couple of strange experiences before this. The first happened shortly after my mom died, when I was in second grade. I felt someone gently grab my shoulder. It didn't feel threatening at all, more like a comforting presence. The second happened years later while I was at work. I was standing on a ledge, leaning against a fence, when suddenly I felt a hard yank, almost like someone was trying to pull me down. In both cases, I immediately looked around and nobody was there. Fast forward to college. I moved into a house a little later than my roommates because I had badly injured my hand a few weeks before move-in and couldn't help lift anything. While I was staying back, my roommates told me that they'd been hearing footsteps in the attic at night. The attic was considered uninhabitable and we weren't allowed access except in emergencies. They also mentioned hearing random creaks throughout the house. I didn't think much of it. It was an old house. When I finally moved in, everything seemed normal. I didn't hear any of the noises they described, and I never got a creepy feeling from the place. A few weeks later, my roommate Elle and I were skateboarding around town when we found an old painting leaning against a trash can. Like every horror movie ever, we decided to bring it home. We were both film students, so we joked nonstop about it being haunted. As a prank, we put it in our other roommate Kay's room while she was gone. She didn't say much about it, she just quietly moved it downstairs. But eventually, I got tired of sharing a room and moved into the basement. I've slept in basements most of my life and honestly prefer them. At first, everything was great. I was sleeping better than I had in months. And then I started feeling sick. Nothing severe, just generally run down. Around this time, our friend C was over a lot. One night we smoked a joint and watched TV. He jokingly told me he was going to come downstairs later and mess with me. That night I fell asleep, and then I suddenly jolted awake. For some reason, I felt extremely on edge. I looked around and saw C standing in the middle of the basement, and assuming he was messing with me, I grabbed a pillow and launched it at him. He immediately darted behind a giant beanbag chair. I got up to catch him, but nobody was there. Confused, I went upstairs and found C asleep on the couch, snoring. I woke him up and asked if he had been downstairs. He said no, and I made him swear that he wasn't lying. He wasn't. I even called Elle to see if he'd come home. He was hours away visiting family. At that point, I convinced myself it was probably the weed and went back to sleep. A few days passed without anything strange happening. Then it happened again. I woke up in the middle of the night and saw C standing in the same spot. This time I called out to him. He ran off in the same direction as before. I immediately checked my phone and saw that C had been active on Snapchat a minute earlier. At his house. About 15 minutes away. I called him freaking out, and he called me a wimp and told me to deal with it. At that point, I started wondering if something was wrong with me. I talked to Elle about it and mentioned that I'd been feeling sick, so we checked all the carbon monoxide detectors because I'd read stories about people hallucinating due to CO2 poisoning. But everything checked out. The detectors worked, and there were no issues. That night, Elle left to visit a friend and I stayed home. This time, I saw my roommate instead of C. I woke up and saw Elle standing in the basement, and thinking he'd come home early, I called out to him. He immediately ran off, and as I reached for my phone to turn on the flashlight, my phone started ringing. It was L. He was outside asking me to unlock the front door because he was locked out, and I hadn't locked any doors. That was the moment I officially lost it. I was getting increasingly sick and mentally exhausted, so I went to the ER and they ran several tests but couldn't find anything wrong with me. The next night, I stayed at my friend S's house to get away from everything. Around 2 a.m., S got a phone call from L. He sounded panicked. He asked if I had left the house. When S sent him a picture of me asleep on the floor, L freaked out. Apparently, he heard someone banging on the front door and calling his name, asking to be let in, and he was convinced it was me. Needless to say, I didn't sleep much after hearing that. Part of me was relieved someone else had experienced something weird. I mean, at least it wasn't just me anymore. We had a friend at film school who studied occult literature, and his girlfriend considered herself a witch. We trusted them enough to ask for some help. The moment our friend stepped into the basement, he walked directly to the spot where I'd seen the figures. He stopped and said the area felt incredibly cold and heavy. Then he gave us some sage and a Ouija board. We checked the painting first. He didn't think there was anything unusual about it beyond looking creepy and old. And that's when we decided to use the Ouija board. We followed all the usual rules, lit a candle, and sat in the exact spot where the figures always appeared. The first thing the planchette moved to was 666. We all laughed and assumed one of us was messing around. After that, though, the responses became oddly specific. Elle started asking questions about a friend of his who had passed away, questions only she would have known. The board answered correctly. Oddly enough, using the Ouija board turned out to be one of the least scary paranormal experiences we had in that house. Afterward, we saged the house and left for Thanksgiving break. When I returned, my girlfriend had bought me a sleep mask because my sleep had become such a mess. And one afternoon, I was trying to take a nap when I heard Kay talking with her sister upstairs. I clearly heard her sister ask, "Right there?" And I heard Kay respond, "Yeah, stand there." I pulled off my sleep mask. Nobody was there. I called Kay, and she was across the state driving her sister home. I was completely alone in the house. That night after work, I returned to that empty house. My coworkers had told me that if I was dealing with something paranormal, the best thing to do was ignore it or be polite. I didn't even get the chance. I was fully awake when I saw a hand slowly wrap around the corner of the basement staircase. To explain the layout, there was a landing where one staircase continued to the back door while another turned toward the basement. And the hand appeared from that landing. Its fingers slowly curled around the banister. And then I saw its face. The closest comparison I can make is Joe the Cave Troll from the Impractical Jokers movie, but greener, thinner, and covered in veins. I was done. Absolutely done. I ran directly at it, yelled for it to leave, spread salt around the stairs in my bed, and somehow managed to sleep afterward. Soon after, I contacted C again. He told me his mother practiced witchcraft and offered a cleansing ritual. So we opened every window and door in the house, and C walked room to room with Sage while reciting a spell intended to force unwanted spirits out. For the first time, we opened the attic. The moment he stepped in, the sage went out. We relit it and kept searching. While looking around, we noticed two mirrors facing each other. We'd heard that some people believe mirrors facing one another can act as spiritual portals, so we turned them around. A few moments later, we heard a massive bang from the basement, then several smaller bangs. It sounded exactly like the basement window had slammed open, hit the ceiling, and then bounced shut. We ran downstairs, and the window was closed. But we noticed something else. As we approached the painting with the the smoke suddenly started billowing away from it, moving against the direction it had been traveling. I immediately carried the painting outside and left it there. After that, I moved back upstairs. Not long afterward, Elle moved out completely. We reached out to multiple paranormal investigators, but nobody wanted to check the house. Our landlord casually mentioned that someone may have died there years ago, or that someone had been transported to a hospital from the property and later died. But to this day, I have no idea what we were dealing with. If anyone has theories, paranormal or otherwise, I generally love to hear them. Hey guys, this submitter also shared with me their YouTube page and Instagram. Go check it out, at Darely Lade and Vincent. The correct spelling of that is on your screen, and it will also be in the description. This is my story by Just Brad. The story takes place when I was 14. I'm 18 now, and my family didn't do a lot for the summer before, so my dad wanted to take me out camping with my brothers. My mom was too scared to come with, and for the right reason. Only one of my brothers came with me and my dad that day. He was 9 at the time and went to a woodland area nearby my hometown. It wasn't far to drive, but quite far to walk. We brought supplies, and I'm from the UK, so we didn't need to worry about much more protection than a knife, as the animals aren't as dangerous as other countries. We walked for maybe half an hour before finding a spot to place our tent, and then we set it up together, next to a small river, if you could even call it that. We set a fire and made dinner using pots and bottled water to make eggs, and once we had eaten, we chilled out for a bit watching the wildlife as the sun set on the tree line in the distance. We saw the occasional person walk through as there was a trail nearby, and around 8 p.m. on that dark October night, someone else set up camp on the opposite side of the trail path. We watched them set up, and my dad even offered to help, but the man declined. He looked mid-40s, maybe even 50. We didn't see him as a threat. Once he finished setting things up, and we had all spoken between each other, we put out our fire and got into our sleeping bags. We slept through the night normally until the early hours of the morning, and I'd woken up to the sounds of rustling around our tent. I was confused and thought it was just an animal. I didn't move. I just tried to fall back asleep. But then I heard it. The quiet whistle of a man blowing air through his lips. I woke up instantly. I looked over, slowly seeing if maybe it was my dad. I looked over and he was sound asleep, my brother next to me too, his eyes shut calmly as he rested. But I heard that noise, the whistling circling the tent. I slowly sat up and grabbed our bag, and I pulled out the small knife and clutched it, my knuckles turning white. I held it close to me, listening to the whistles. I kept my breathing smooth and listened. And then I tried to slide back to make myself lay down again in case there was a light and he could see me sitting up. But I accidentally hit my brother with the back part of my elbow. He coughed in his sleep, and the whistling stopped right behind the tent. I could hear leaves rustling, but not like walking, like turning. I could tell whoever was outside had heard us, but I didn't have any proof this person had malicious intent. And then I heard slow steps walking towards the entrance of the tent. I was terrified. I clutched the knife ready to defend myself. But then I heard it, a yell from the man across the path to us, screaming that that person should get out of there. And then I heard speedy steps exiting away. I'd never been more relieved in my life. Still clutching the knife, I opened the tent door and yelled out to the old man, thanking him with all I had. There was no way to describe it. I was stuttering. He just gave me a thumbs up. I could barely see through his flashlight. And then I shut the tent door and went back to sleep. A little later, I woke up faintly again to noises, but I didn't think much of it. The man had scared whoever or whatever that was away. I went back to sleep, knife in hand, and I woke up the next morning. My dad and my brother were already packing up. I was happy I survived the night's attempts of a possible break-in or murder or whatever. and I sighed and got ready to pack up the tent. Before leaving, I looked across the trail path at the man's tent one last time. I assumed he was asleep, and I followed my dad leaving the tent and didn't return to those woods for over a week. But a week or so later, I was with my dad walking my dog in the same woods when we got to where we had camped. And I looked through the trees, and that man's tent was still there. We thought maybe he's just a long camper. I mean, he did look like he was packed pretty heavy. But my dad wanted to thank the man after hearing the story I told him, so he approached the tent and tapped on it with no reply. When he opened the tent around after the 5th attempt of tapping, he looked in, and his smiling face dropped. I was confused as I looked at my dad, and without dropping the tent zipper, he took out his phone and called someone. I looked in the tent, and my heart started thumping hard. What I saw inside was a man, half rotted with blood drying around the inside of the tent, a knife sticking out of his chest. I immediately threw up in disgust as the stench that the tent had held inside for so long finally escaped all over us. The police came and eventually removed the body, and we went home. I blame myself for the death of that man today, and we had a significantly bigger tent, and I assume whoever was outside our tent was debating if he could kill us all. But when the other man shouted, revealing only one man in his tent, the person took that as a better opportunity. Whoever killed that man was never caught, but we haven't been back to the woods that we camped at since. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like me to narrate, email it to unclejosh.truescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. If you're catching this on YouTube and you like what you heard and saw, why not give the video a thumbs up, share it with a friend, leave a comment. I'd love to know what you thought of the stories. It's all free and it all helps out with the algorithms, so I appreciate it. Follow me on social media, and if you'd like to take your support a step further, find a link to my Patreon page in the description and consider getting some Uncle Josh and Campfire Crew merchandise. A link to my TeePublic storefront is also in the description. Everyone, be excellent to each other, and until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything: a ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.